Each twist of the mop sent sharp pain through my lower back, while I tried to ignore the persistent ache that had settled deep in my abdomen. The fluorescent lights of Meridian Securities buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the polished marble floors of the 52nd floor. The scent of industrial cleaning solution burned my nostrils, mixing with the lingering aroma of expensive coffee and leather from the executive conference rooms I wasn't allowed to enter during business hours. I had been working here for 8 months now, ever since I desperately needed employment that wouldn't ask too many questions about my past. The night cleaning shift at one of Chicago's most prestigious cybersecurity firms paid well enough to cover my tiny studio apartment and the growing medical bills I couldn't afford to think about. My supervisor, Mrs. Chen, appreciated that I showed up on time and didn't steal anything, which was apparently more than she could say for most of her other employees. The weight in my belly had become impossible to ignore, though I'd managed to hide it beneath loose-fitting uniforms and strategic positioning behind cleaning carts. At 5 months along, I was running out of time before my condition became obvious to everyone around me. The baby's father didn't know, couldn't know, and I intended to keep it that way. Jake Morrison had been my partner in every sense of the word, brilliant, charming, and completely devoted to his work. We'd built our freelance hacking business from nothing, taking on corporate security assessments and penetration testing for legitimate clients. Until that night, 3 months ago, when everything changed. I forced myself to focus on the rhythmic motion of mopping, letting the familiar routine calm my racing thoughts. The executive floor was always eerily quiet after hours, with only the distant hum of servers and the occasional ding of the elevator carrying other night shift workers to different floors. Most of the offices belonged to senior partners and executives, whose names were engraved on brass plaques beside mahogany doors. I wasn't supposed to clean inside those offices, just the common areas, hallways, and conference rooms. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out with cleaning solution damp fingers. A text from my neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, who watched me come and go at odd hours with motherly concern. "Mija, you look tired. Come by for soup tomorrow." The kindness of strangers had kept me afloat these past months, since I couldn't risk contacting anyone from my old life. The elevator chimed behind me, and I glanced at my watch. 10:45 p.m. Most of the night security team was on their rounds, and the other cleaning crew worked the lower floors. I rarely saw anyone up here, except for the occasional workaholic executive who'd forgotten something important. Footsteps approached across the marble, the distinct sound of expensive leather shoes that cost more than I made in a month. I kept my head down, focusing on a particularly stubborn scuff mark near the reception desk. The company had a strict policy about staff interactions with executives, essentially. We were meant to be invisible. "Excuse me," a voice said behind me, deep and familiar in a way that made my blood freeze in my veins. I couldn't breathe. My hands tightened around the mop handle until my knuckles went white, and for a moment I considered pretending I hadn't heard him. Maybe if I didn't turn around, this moment wouldn't be real. Maybe I could finish this shift, go home to my tiny apartment, and continue living the quiet, anonymous life I'd built. Jessica, the sound of my real name, spoken in that voice I'd tried so hard to forget, shattered any hope of remaining unnoticed. Slowly, as if moving through thick honey, I turned to face the man I'd been hiding from for 3 months. Julian Cross stood 15 feet away, dressed in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than my annual salary. His dark hair was shorter than I remembered, styled with the kind of precision that spoke of expensive barbers and unlimited resources. The harsh lobby lighting carved sharp angles across his face, emphasizing the aristocratic cheekbones and strong jaw that had once made me forget every rational thought in my head. But it was his eyes that nearly brought me to my knees. Those same ice-blue eyes that had looked at me with love, with passion, with promises of forever. Now they studied me with the cold calculation of a predator assessing wounded prey. "Hello, Jessica," he said quietly, his voice carrying easily across the empty space between us. You're a difficult woman to find. I tried to speak, but my throat had closed completely. My heart hammered so violently, I was certain he could hear it echoing off the marble walls. This couldn't be happening. I'd been so careful, so thorough in covering my tracks. I'd changed my name, paid cash for everything, avoided security cameras whenever possible. I started, then stopped, my voice coming out as barely a whisper. I don't know what you're talking about. My name is Sarah Parker. A slight smile curved his lips, but it didn't reach those Arctic eyes. Sarah Parker, who started working here 8 months ago with impeccable references from a cleaning company that doesn't exist. Who pays her rent in cash and has no credit history prior to 6 months ago. Who's 5 months pregnant with a child conceived around the time she disappeared from her old life. The mop clattered to the floor as my hands began shaking uncontrollably. He knew. Of course he knew. Julian Cross didn't become one of the most powerful men in Chicago by being careless or uninformed. I'd been naive to think I could hide from him indefinitely. The baby isn't yours, I said quickly, the lie burning my throat. Isn't it? He stepped closer, his movements fluid and unhurried, like a cat stalking a cornered mouse. Because my sources tell me you haven't been with anyone since you left. Haven't dated, haven't even spoken to a man outside of work-related interactions. Rather admirable commitment to single motherhood, considering. I backed away until my hip hit the reception desk, trapped between expensive furniture and the man who'd once been everything to me. What do you want, Julian? I want what's mine, he said simply, his gaze dropping meaningfully to my stomach before returning to my face. I want my child, and I want the woman who thought she could run from me. I can't. The words came out broken, desperate. You don't understand what happened, why I had to leave. I understand that Jake Morrison is dead, Julian said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Shot execution style outside a police station 3 months ago, right around the time you vanished. I understand that Carlos Mendoza has been asking questions about a freelance hacker who may have accessed information she shouldn't have, and I understand that you're in more danger than you realize. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. I gripped the edge of the reception desk, fighting against the wave of nausea that had nothing to do with pregnancy. How did you find me? I own this building, Jessica. I own half the buildings in downtown Chicago. Did you really think you could hide from me by cleaning my offices? The revelation hit me like a physical blow. All these months, I'd been working in his building, breathing air he owned, inadvertently placing myself under his protection without even realizing it. It would have been funny if it weren't so terrifying. I have to go, I said weakly, knowing even as I spoke that escape was impossible. No, Julian said, pulling his phone from his jacket pocket. You don't. The security guards appeared within 30 seconds of Julian's phone call, moving with the silent efficiency of trained professionals. I recognized them as the building's night security team, men I'd exchanged polite nods with for 8 months, never realizing they were reporting my every movement to the man who now stood watching me with predatory satisfaction. Mr. Cross, the lead guard said respectfully. How can we assist you? Please escort Miss Harper to my private elevator, Julian said, without taking his eyes off me. She'll be joining me upstairs. The casual use of my real surname made my stomach lurch. How long had he known I was here? How long had I been performing this elaborate charade while he watched from the shadows, allowing me the illusion of freedom? I'm not going anywhere with you, I said, trying to inject steel into my voice despite the tremor I couldn't control. I have rights. You can't just kidnap me. Julian's laugh was soft and genuinely amused. Kidnap? Jessica, you're standing in my building, during your shift, speaking to your employer. There's nothing illegal about a business owner having a conversation with an employee. Employer? The word came out strangled. Meridian Securities is a subsidiary of Cross Industries. he explained with mock patience. Has been for 2 years. Every paycheck you've received has come from me. Every security clearance, every background check, every decision about your employment has ultimately been mine. The room spun around me as the implications crashed down. I'd been working for him all along, accepting his money, living under his protection without knowing it. The illusion of independence I'd fought so hard to maintain crumbled completely. The pregnancy, I whispered, my hand instinctively moving to protect my stomach. You've known the whole time. I've known since your first doctor's appointment, Julian confirmed. Dr. Patricia Huang at Chicago Women's Health. Excellent physician. I made sure you were assigned to her specifically. She's been keeping me informed of your progress and the baby's development. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Even my medical care had been compromised, invaded by his influence. That's illegal. Patient confidentiality is surprisingly flexible when the father has legitimate concerns about his child's welfare, Julian interrupted smoothly. Dr. Huang was quite understanding when I explained that the mother of my baby was in hiding due to dangerous circumstances beyond her control. I felt like I was drowning, struggling for air in a situation that grew more impossible by the minute. You told her you were the father? I am the father, Jessica. Running away doesn't change biology. The security guards flanked me now, not touching but making it clear that resistance would be futile. I looked around desperately, searching for an escape route that didn't exist. The building's security system, the elevator controls, even the emergency exits would all be under Julian's control. There's someone else you should know about, Julian said, checking his expensive watch with casual indifference. Elena Vasquez. Perhaps you remember her from the charity gala where we first met. Tall, blonde, family owns half of Argentina's cattle ranches. My blood turned to ice. I remembered Elena perfectly. Elegant, sophisticated, everything I'd never been. She'd been draped on Julian's arm at every social function, playing the role of perfect society girlfriend while I'd been his secret, the hacker he kept hidden from his legitimate world. She's been very understanding about our situation, Julian continued conversationally. Especially when I explained that you'd suffered some kind of nervous breakdown and disappeared. She's actually been quite helpful in the search efforts. You told her about me? I couldn't hide the shock in my voice. Elena knows everything that matters. She understands that I have certain obligations regarding my child, and she's prepared to be accommodating. In fact, she's been quite looking forward to meeting you properly. The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. He was planning to keep me close enough to control the baby while maintaining his relationship with Elena. I would be the dirty secret, the inconvenient mother, tolerated, but never truly acknowledged. I won't be your kept woman while you marry someone else, I said through gritted teeth. Marry? Julian's eyebrows rose slightly. Who said anything about marriage? Elena and I have an understanding, but it's hardly conventional. She has her interests. I have mine. You and our child simply represent a new factor in the equation. A new phone began buzzing, not mine, and Julian answered it with fluid efficiency. Yes? Good. Bring her up. No, the private elevator. 5 minutes. He ended the call and smiled at me with what might have been genuine warmth if I didn't know better. Elena is here. She's been so curious to meet the mother of my child. I thought tonight would be perfect for introductions. Panic flooded my system. Whatever control I'd thought I had in this situation was evaporating rapidly. Julian, please. I can't. I'm not ready for this. You've had 3 months to get ready, darling. 3 months to come to me voluntarily and explain what happened with Jake Morrison and Carlos Mendoza. 3 months to trust me enough to let me protect you and our baby. His voice hardened slightly. That time is over. The elevator dinged softly, and I heard the whisper of expensive fabric and the click of designer heels across marble. Elena Vasquez emerged like something from a fashion magazine. Her platinum hair swept into an elegant chignon. Her cream-colored dress probably worth more than my yearly salary. She was even more beautiful than I remembered, with the kind of polished perfection that money and breeding could provide. "Julian," she said in her cultured accent, her dark eyes finding me immediately. "So this is Jessica." I wanted to disappear into the floor. Standing there in my stained cleaning uniform, with my hair escaping its ponytail and my hands still smelling of industrial disinfectant, I felt like exactly what I was. A fraud, a pretender, someone who didn't belong in their world of wealth and power. "Elena, meet Jessica Harper," Julian said smoothly. "The mother of my son." "Son?" I turned to stare at him. "How do you know it's a boy?" "Dr. Huang shared the ultrasound results," he said with satisfaction. "My son is healthy and developing perfectly. Due in approximately 4 months. Elena approached me with the grace of a predator, her smile perfectly calibrated to convey both warmth and dominance. "You're much prettier than your surveillance photos suggested," she said kindly, "though Julian mentioned you'd been living under difficult circumstances." Surveillance photos. The casual mention made my knees weak. How long had they been watching me? How many private moments had been documented and analyzed? "I should get back to work," I said desperately, looking toward my abandoned cleaning cart. "Oh, you won't be working here anymore," Elena said with gentle finality. "Julian and I have made other arrangements for your comfort and security. We've prepared a lovely suite for you in Julian's building on Lakeshore Drive. Top floor, beautiful views, everything you could need." "A prison," I said flatly. "A sanctuary," Julian corrected, "with staff to ensure your health and safety, and our child's welfare." The possessive emphasis on "our" wasn't lost on me. This wasn't about my choice or my comfort. This was about control, about ensuring that Julian Cross's heir would be born and raised under his complete authority. "What if I refuse?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Julian exchanged a look with Elena, some silent communication passing between them. "Then Carlos Mendoza finds out where you are," he said quietly, "along with the information about what you discovered in his financial records. I'm told his organization has very specific methods for dealing with people who compromise their operations." The threat hung in the air between us, as effective as chains or bars. Mendoza's reputation was legendary even among criminals. Brutal, efficient, and completely without mercy. If Julian withdrew his protection, I would be dead within hours. "I need time to think," I said weakly. "Of course," Elena said graciously. "You'll have all the time you need. In your new home, where we can ensure nothing disturbs your peace of mind." The security guards moved closer, their intention clear. I was going with them whether I agreed or not. The illusion of choice was just another cruelty, another way for Julian to maintain the pretense that this was somehow consensual. As they escorted me toward Julian's private elevator, I caught sight of my reflection in the polished metal doors. Pale, frightened, defeated. This was how my freedom ended, not with violence or dramatic confrontation, but with the quiet, inexorable pressure of money and power closing around me like a silk-lined cage. The elevator rose toward the penthouse level, carrying me away from the life I'd tried to build, and toward an uncertain future, controlled by the man I'd once loved, and the woman who would now shape my destiny. Julian's penthouse office occupied the entire top floor of the Cross Industries building, a monument to wealth and power that took my breath away despite my fear. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Chicago's glittering skyline, while original artwork worth millions adorned the walls. The space smelled of expensive leather, aged whiskey, and the faint trace of Julian's cologne that had once made me weak in the knees. Elena guided me to a plush sofa positioned to take advantage of the spectacular view, her movements graceful and assured. She belonged here in a way I never would, comfortable with luxury as her birthright rather than an impossible dream. "Would you like something to drink?" she asked with genuine courtesy. "Tea? Water?" Julian keeps an excellent selection of herbal teas that are safe during pregnancy. The thoughtfulness caught me off guard. I'd expected cruelty, possession, dominance. Instead, Elena seemed determined to play the role of gracious hostess, as if this were a social visit, rather than an elaborate kidnapping. "Water would be nice," I said carefully, settling onto the sofa with my hands protectively curved around my belly. Julian moved to a hidden bar built into the wall, his movements economical and precise. I watched him pour ice water into crystal glasses, remembering other times I'd watched those hands work. Building computer programs, planning security assessments, tracing patterns across my skin in the darkness of his bedroom. "You're wondering how we met," Elena said, settling beside me with the easy familiarity of someone accustomed to reading people's thoughts. "Julian and I mean." I nodded mutely, not trusting my voice. "My father and his father were business partners," she explained. "Import-export, primarily South American markets. I've known Julian since we were children, watched him build his empire from the foundation his family provided." She accepted a glass of wine from Julian, her fingers brushing his in a gesture of casual intimacy. "We understand each other." "Understanding is everything in relationships," Julian said, settling into the chair across from us. "Shared goals, compatible expectations, mutual benefit." Elena appreciates the practical aspects of partnership. The coded language wasn't lost on me. They were telling me this was a business arrangement, not a love match. But that knowledge didn't make my situation any less trapped. "Tell me about Jake Morrison," Elena said suddenly, her tone shifting to something sharper. "Julian mentioned he was your business partner?" The name hit like a physical blow, bringing back memories I'd tried desperately to suppress. Jake with his infectious laugh and brilliant mind. Jake who'd believed we could build something legitimate together. Jake whose blood had stained a police station parking lot 3 months ago. "He was my partner," I said quietly. "We ran a cybersecurity consulting business, penetration testing, security assessments for corporate clients, everything legal and legitimate." "Until it wasn't?" Julian said with uncomfortable accuracy. I closed my eyes, remembering that night in perfect, horrible detail. We'd been hired by a mid-size investment firm to test their network security, a routine job that should have taken 2 days maximum. But Jake had found something in their system that didn't belong. Encrypted files hidden in seemingly innocent directories, financial records that traced money through a labyrinth of shell companies and offshore accounts. "We thought we'd stumbled onto corporate fraud," I continued, my voice barely above a whisper. "Embezzlement, maybe tax evasion. Jake wanted to report it to the authorities, thought we had a moral obligation." "But you didn't want to get involved," Elena prompted gently. "I was scared. The amounts were too large, the patterns too sophisticated. This wasn't some mid-level executive skimming funds. This was a professional money laundering operation." I looked up at Julian, seeing my own memories reflected in his ice-blue eyes. "I tried to convince Jake to walk away, to delete everything and pretend we'd never seen it." "But Jake Morrison was an idealist," Julian said, "the kind of man who believed in justice and doing the right thing." Tears burned my eyes. "He went to the FBI, brought them copies of everything we'd found, offered to testify about the network intrusion that had led to the discovery. He thought he was being a hero. And instead, he was signing his own death warrant," Elena said matter-of-factly. "Carlos Mendoza doesn't appreciate whistleblowers," Julian added, "especially ones who can trace his organization's financial movements with computer code." The casual way they discussed Jake's murder made my stomach churn. These people lived in a world where death was just another business expense, another problem to be solved with money and violence. I found out about the meeting the night before, I said, the words tumbling out in a rush. Jake had told the FBI he could provide more evidence, details about how the system had been compromised. He was so excited, so sure he was doing the right thing. But you knew better, Julian said quietly. I begged him not to go, offered to disappear with him, to run somewhere Mendoza couldn't find us. But Jake said running would prove our guilt, make us look like accomplices instead of witnesses. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, tasting salt and regret. He kissed me goodbye and promised he'd be home for dinner. Elena reached out and touched my hand, her skin warm and soft. I'm sorry, she said, and for a moment her sympathy seemed genuine. Losing someone you love is never easy. The next morning I saw the news report. I continued. Body found in police station parking lot, single gunshot to the head, no witnesses. I knew they'd come for me next, so I ran. And discovered you were pregnant 2 weeks later, Julian said. I stared at him in shock. How could you possibly know that? Because you withdrew $500 cash the day after visiting a clinic in Detroit, he said calmly. The same day you threw away a positive pregnancy test in a gas station bathroom outside Toledo. My people have been tracking your movements since the day Jake Morrison died. The violation was breathtaking. Every moment of privacy, every decision I'd thought was mine alone, had been observed and catalogued. You've been following me for 3 months? Protecting you, Julian corrected. Do you think it's a coincidence that Mendoza's people haven't found you? That you've been able to live quietly and safely, while one of the most dangerous men in Chicago actively hunted for Jake Morrison's partner? The implication slowly sank in. You've been keeping them away from me. I've been ensuring my child's safety, he said, and the safety of the woman carrying him. Elena squeezed my hand gently. Julian takes his responsibilities very seriously. Family is everything to him, even when family relationships are complicated. What do you want from me? I asked, looking between them desperately. What kind of arrangement are you proposing? Julian leaned forward, his expression becoming businesslike. I want my son raised in safety and luxury. I want him to have every advantage my name and resources can provide. I want him to be legitimate in every way that matters. And in exchange? You'll be comfortable, well cared for, protected from any threats, including Carlos Mendoza. He paused meaningfully. Your medical expenses will be covered, along with anything else you or the baby might need. As your mistress, I said flatly. As the mother of my child, Elena corrected smoothly, with all the respect and consideration that position deserves. I looked around the luxurious office, weighing my options. I could try to run again, but Julian had already proved that escape was impossible. I could refuse their offer, but that would likely mean death at Mendoza's hands. Or I could accept this gilded cage, trade my freedom for safety and security. I want guarantees, I said finally. Legal protections for myself and the baby. Of course, Julian said, sounding pleased. Elena has already drafted preliminary agreements covering custody, financial support, and living arrangements. And my legal status? I pressed. I can't spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder for Mendoza's people. Julian's smile was razor sharp. Carlos Mendoza won't be a problem much longer. His organization has been making some very careless mistakes lately. The FBI is building quite an impressive case. The implication was clear. Julian intended to eliminate the threat permanently, using the very law enforcement contacts that had failed to protect Jake. It should have terrified me, but instead I felt a vicious satisfaction. Mendoza deserved to pay for what he'd done. When? I asked. Soon, Elena said. Julian's methods are always thorough, but they take time to implement properly. I closed my eyes, feeling the baby move restlessly inside me, as if sensing the tension in the room. This wasn't love or romance or any of the things I'd once dreamed of. This was a business transaction, coldly negotiated between people who wielded power like weapons. But it was also survival. For me, and for my child. "I'll need my own space," I said finally. "Privacy when I want it." "You'll have an entire floor," Julian assured me. "Decorated however you like, staffed according to your preferences. And after the baby is born?" "We'll reassess," Elena said diplomatically. "Much will depend on how well our arrangement works for everyone involved." The non-answer told me everything I needed to know. Once Julian had his son, my bargaining power would disappear completely. But for now, for these precious months remaining in my pregnancy, I still had something he wanted badly enough to negotiate. "I accept," I said quietly, sealing my fate with 2 simple words. Julian's smile was triumphant, but Elena's expression remained carefully neutral. She understood better than anyone that this was just the beginning, not the end, of a very complicated arrangement. The penthouse suite Julian had prepared for me was more luxurious than any home I'd ever imagined, let alone lived in. Located on the 48th floor of his Lakeshore Drive building, it encompassed the entire north face with wraparound windows that offered breathtaking views of Lake Michigan. The decor was elegant but warm, cream and gold tones that spoke of expensive taste without feeling cold or museum-like. Elena gave me the tour personally, her heels clicking softly on marble floors that transitioned seamlessly to rich hardwood and plush carpeting. The master bedroom featured a king-sized bed with Italian linens and a sitting area positioned to capture the sunrise over the water. An adjoining room had been converted to a nursery, complete with a hand-carved crib that probably cost more than most people's cars. "Julian wanted everything perfect," Elena explained, running her fingers along the crib's intricate woodwork. "He commissioned this from a craftsman in Switzerland. Each detail was specifically chosen for his son. The possessive language wasn't lost on me. This wasn't our baby, or even my baby in their minds. This was Julian's heir, the continuation of his legacy. I was merely the vessel, important only for the life I carried." "It's beautiful," I said honestly, though the opulence felt overwhelming. "But it feels like a museum, like I'm not supposed to actually live here." "You'll adjust," Elena said with confidence. "Luxury becomes comfortable very quickly once you stop fighting it." A soft knock at the door interrupted us, and a woman in her 50s entered with quiet professionalism. She was impeccably dressed in a navy suit, her graying hair pulled back in an elegant chignon that spoke of old money breeding and finishing school education. "Jessica, this is Margaret Whitmore," Elena said. "She'll be managing your household staff and ensuring you have everything you need." Margaret approached with a warm smile that reached her eyes. "Miss Harper, it's such a pleasure to meet you. I've overseen many households over the years, and I want you to know that your comfort and privacy are my absolute priorities." "Thank you," I said uncertainly, not sure how to interact with someone whose job was apparently managing my life. "I've taken the liberty of scheduling some appointments for you," Margaret continued, consulting a leather-bound notebook. "Dr. Huang would like to see you tomorrow for a comprehensive checkup, and there's a personal shopper coming Thursday to help update your wardrobe for the remainder of your pregnancy." The efficiency was startling. In less than 24 hours, they'd transported me from my old life into this new existence, where every detail was anticipated and arranged by others. It should have been relieving, but instead, it felt suffocating. "I don't need new clothes," I protested weakly. "Julian disagrees," Elena said smoothly. "You'll be accompanying him to various social functions in the coming months. His reputation requires a certain standard of presentation." "Social functions?" I stared at her in alarm. I thought I was supposed to stay hidden, protected. "Hidden from Mendoza's people," Elena clarified. But Chicago society needs to understand that Julian Cross has acknowledged his child and the child's mother. Legitimacy requires visibility, within controlled circumstances. The door chimed softly, and Julian himself entered, carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing an expression of satisfied ownership that made my skin crawl. He'd changed from his business suit into dark slacks and a white shirt open at the collar, looking relaxed and completely in control of his domain. "How do you like your new home?" he asked, moving to pour champagne for himself and Elena, while offering me sparkling water in an identical crystal flute. "It's overwhelming," I admitted. "I'm not sure I belong in a place like this." "You belong wherever I say you belong," Julian said matter-of-factly, then seemed to catch himself. "What I mean is, you're the mother of my child. This is exactly where you should be." The slip revealed more than he probably intended about his true feelings regarding my role in his life. I was a possession now, valuable only for what I could provide him. Elena raised her glass in a toast. To new beginnings and unexpected partnerships. We clinked glasses, the crystal singing with expensive clarity. The champagne smelled crisp and celebratory, but I felt more like I was attending my own funeral than celebrating anything positive. "There's something else we need to discuss," Julian said, settling into one of the plush armchairs that faced the lake view. "Carlos Mendoza has been making inquiries about your whereabouts. More aggressive inquiries." My blood went cold. "What kind of inquiries?" "He's offered a substantial reward for information about Jake Morrison's partner," Elena explained. $500,000 to anyone who can lead him to the person who accessed his financial records. "He's also been very creative in his methods of persuasion," Julian added grimly. 3 people who worked at your old apartment building have been hospitalized in the past week. Nothing fatal, just encouragement to remember anything unusual about former tenants." The casual mention of violence made my hands shake. I set down my water glass before I could drop it, wrapping my arms around my belly protectively. "He's torturing innocent people because of me." "He's torturing people because he's a sociopathic criminal," Julian corrected firmly. "This is not your fault, Jessica. You and Jake stumbled into something much larger and more dangerous than either of you realized. Which is why you can never leave this building without security," Elena added. "Julian has arranged for a team of professionals to ensure your safety whenever you need to go out." "Bodyguards," I said flatly. "Protection," Julian corrected. "Men whose job is keeping you and my son alive." The weight of my new reality settled around me like chains. I would be safe, comfortable, well cared for, and completely under Julian's control for the foreseeable future. Every movement monitored, every decision filtered through his security protocols. "What about after the baby is born?" I asked, needing to understand the long-term implications. "Will I be able to have any kind of normal life?" Elena and Julian exchanged a look that spoke of previous conversations I hadn't been part of. "That depends on several factors," Elena said diplomatically. "How well you adapt to your new circumstances, how the security situation evolves, how effectively we can neutralize the threat Mendoza represents. And how good a mother you prove to be," Julian added quietly. The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. My future, my freedom, even my relationship with my own child would depend on Julian's assessment of my performance in the role he'd assigned me. Margaret cleared her throat delicately. "If I may, Miss Harper, dinner will be served at 7. The chef has prepared a menu specifically designed for optimal prenatal nutrition. And your personal trainer will arrive at 9 tomorrow morning for your first consultation." "Personal trainer?" I looked at Julian in confusion. "Prenatal fitness is crucial for a healthy delivery," he said. "Dr. Huang specifically recommended maintaining appropriate exercise throughout your pregnancy." Every aspect of my life was being managed, controlled, optimized for the production of Julian's heir. I felt like a prize-breeding mare, valuable only for my reproductive capacity. "I need some air," I said suddenly, moving toward the windows that overlooked the lake. "The balcony is through those doors," Elena said kindly. "The view is spectacular at sunset." I stepped outside into the cooling evening air, the wind from the lake carrying the scent of water and the distant sounds of the city below. Chicago spread out beneath me in all directions, millions of lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering darkness. It was beautiful and impressive, and completely removed from the real world where ordinary people struggled with ordinary problems. Julian joined me at the railing, his presence warm and solid beside me. "I know this is difficult," he said quietly, "but I want you to understand something. This isn't just about control or possession. I genuinely want what's best for you and our child." "Your definition of best and mine might be very different," I replied without looking at him. "Perhaps. But my definition includes staying alive, which should count for something." He turned to face me, his expression serious. "Mendoza isn't going to give up. He can't afford to let someone who knows his financial secrets remain free. The only way you're safe is under my protection." I wanted to argue, to insist I could find another way. But the memory of Jake's blood on asphalt was too fresh. Mendoza had killed the man I loved without hesitation or mercy. He would do the same to me without a second thought. "For how long?" I asked. "How long do I have to live like this?" Julian's smile was grim and predatory. "Until Carlos Mendoza is no longer a problem. And I promise you, Jessica, that day is coming very soon." The wind picked up, carrying the promise of storm clouds gathering over the lake. I shivered and went back inside, leaving Julian on the balcony with his schemes and his certainty that money and power could solve any problem. Behind me, I heard him making a phone call, his voice too low for me to make out words, but the tone unmistakably that of a man giving orders that would change lives forever. 3 weeks into my new life, I finally understood the true scope of Julian's empire. It wasn't just the buildings, the businesses, or the bank accounts. It was the intricate web of relationships and obligations that extended throughout Chicago and beyond. Every favor owed, every secret kept, every alliance forged had been carefully cultivated to serve his interests. I learned this during my first social appearance at a charity gala benefiting children's hospitals. Elena had spent hours preparing me, from the custom-designed maternity gown that cost more than I used to make in 6 months, to the subtle makeup that enhanced my features without appearing overdone. Diamond earrings borrowed from Julian's collection caught the light as I moved, and a matching bracelet circled my wrist like an elegant shackle. "Remember," Elena had coached me in the car, "you're not Jessica Harper, the frightened cleaning woman. You're Jessica Cross, mother of Julian's child, deserving of respect and deference. Carry yourself accordingly." The name change had been her suggestion, a way to simplify the social dynamics. Let people assume we were married or engaged. The truth was too complicated for polite society to process comfortably. The ballroom at the Palmer House was magnificent, crystal chandeliers casting warm light over hundreds of Chicago's elite. I recognized faces from newspaper society pages and business journals, men and women whose decisions shaped the city's economy and culture. And every single one of them seemed to know exactly who I was. Julian, a distinguished man in his 60s, approached us with a warm smile. "You must introduce me to this lovely lady." "Senator Morrison, I'd like you to meet Jessica," Julian said smoothly, his hand resting possessively on the small of my back. "Jessica, Senator Morrison chairs the Appropriations Committee." My blood froze at the surname. "Morrison? No relation to that poor young man who was killed a few months ago," the senator said with practiced sympathy. "Terrible business, that. I understand the FBI is still investigating. Julian's fingers pressed gently against my spine, a subtle reminder to maintain composure. Yes, very tragic, I managed. As the evening progressed, I began to understand the careful choreography of Julian's world. Every introduction was strategic. Every conversation served multiple purposes. Business deals were negotiated over champagne and hors d'oeuvres, political alliances strengthened through seemingly casual social interaction. The Martinelli account, I overheard Julian discussing with a well-dressed woman near the bar. I think we can accommodate their needs through our subsidiary arrangements. Martinelli. The name sparked a memory from my months researching Mendoza's financial network. Martinelli Holdings had been one of the shell companies used to move money through legitimate businesses. Later, during a quiet moment when Elena was networking across the room, I confronted Julian about what I'd heard. "You're doing business with Mendoza's people," I said quietly, trying to keep my voice level. Julian's smile was sharp and satisfied. "I'm doing business with former associates of Mendoza's organization. Many of them are finding it prudent to distance themselves from Carlos and align with more stable partners." "You're stealing his empire." "I'm providing better opportunities for people who were previously constrained by loyalty to a dead man." "Dead man?" I stared at him in shock. Julian's expression didn't change, but something cold and final flickered in his eyes. "Carlos Mendoza was found in his home this morning. Apparent heart attack. Though I'm told the stress of recent FBI investigations may have been a contributing factor." The ballroom continued spinning around us, laughter and conversation flowing like champagne, but I felt like I was drowning. "You killed him." I provided information to law enforcement that allowed them to build an airtight case against his organization, Julian corrected calmly. "What happened after that was simply the natural consequence of a life lived in violation of basic human decency. You're talking about murder like it's a business transaction." "I'm talking about removing a threat to my family," Julian said firmly. "Mendoza would have hunted you until the day he died. Now he's dead, and you're safe. Our son is safe. That's all that matters to me." The casual way he discussed orchestrating a man's death should have terrified me. But instead I felt a disturbing sense of relief. Jake's killer was gone. The monster who had tortured innocent people searching for me would never hurt anyone again. "The FBI investigation?" I asked. "We'll conclude that Carlos Mendoza was the head of a major money laundering operation responsible for millions in financial crimes. His associates will face prosecution or flee the country. His business interests will be acquired by legitimate enterprises at substantial discounts." Julian's smile was predatory. Justice and profit, working hand in hand. Elena appeared beside us, her timing impeccable as always. "How are you feeling, darling? You look a bit pale." "Just tired," I said, though exhaustion was the least of my problems. "Perhaps we should head home," Julian suggested, already signaling for our security detail. "You need your rest." The drive back to Lakeshore Drive passed in contemplative silence. I stared out at the city lights, thinking about power and protection, about the price of safety and the cost of belonging to someone like Julian Cross. "You're having doubts," Elena observed from the seat beside me. "Wouldn't you?" I replied. "I did initially," she admitted. "Julian's world can be overwhelming for people who weren't born into it. But I learned that fighting it only makes you miserable. Accepting it, embracing it, allows you to find unexpected pleasures in the arrangement." "Such as?" "Influence, the ability to help people, to make real changes in the world. Julian isn't just wealthy, Jessica. He's powerful in ways that matter. The children's hospital where we raised money tonight, he's their largest private donor. The scholarship program for underprivileged students, his foundation has sent hundreds of kids to college. Built on the backs of people like Mendoza," I said. "Built on the ruins of people like Mendoza," Elena corrected. Julian doesn't create evil, Jessica. He redirects it toward more constructive purposes. Back in my penthouse suite, I found that Margaret had laid out comfortable nightclothes and prepared chamomile tea. The baby was particularly active, rolling and kicking as if responding to my emotional turmoil. Julian knocked softly on my bedroom door as I was getting ready for bed. "May I come in?" I nodded, and he entered carrying a small wrapped box. "A gift," he said simply, "to commemorate your first official appearance as part of my family." Inside the box was a necklace that took my breath away. A delicate platinum chain supporting a pendant shaped like a mother and child, crafted from diamonds and sapphires that caught the light like captured stars. "It's beautiful," I whispered, genuinely moved despite everything. "It belonged to my mother," Julian said quietly. "She wore it while she was pregnant with me. I hoped you might like to continue the tradition." The gesture was unexpectedly tender, a glimpse of the man I'd fallen in love with beneath the ruthless businessman and crime lord. For a moment, I could almost forget about the violence and manipulation, almost convince myself that this could work. "Thank you," I said, letting him fasten the chain around my neck. The pendant rested perfectly against my skin, warm from his touch. The contractions started at 3 a.m, 4 weeks earlier than expected. I woke to a sharp pain that wrapped around my entire torso, so intense it stole my breath and left me gasping against the Egyptian cotton sheets. For a moment, I thought it might be false labor, the Braxton Hicks contractions Dr. Huang had warned me about. But when the second one hit 8 minutes later with even greater force, I knew our son had decided to make his entrance into the world ahead of schedule. Margaret appeared within minutes of my pressing the emergency call button, moving with the calm efficiency that had made her invaluable over the past months. She took one look at my face, pale and drawn with pain, and immediately activated the protocols Julian had established for this moment. "Mr. Cross is in London," she informed me while helping me into a robe. "But his plane is already being prepared for immediate departure. He'll be here within 8 hours. 8 hours might be too long," I gasped as another contraction gripped me. "Dr. Huang is on her way, along with the entire medical team," Margaret assured me. "Everything is prepared. You and the baby will be perfectly safe." The private medical suite Julian had constructed on the 45th floor was more sophisticated than most hospitals. As the contractions intensified, I found myself surrounded by monitors, IV lines, and the quiet competence of medical professionals who'd been handpicked for their expertise and discretion. "The baby's heartbeat is strong," Dr. Huang informed me, her voice calm and reassuring. "But he's definitely eager to meet his parents. This labor is progressing very quickly." Elena arrived as the sun was rising over Lake Michigan, still elegant despite the early hour. She'd flown back from a business trip in Argentina, covering thousands of miles to be present for the birth of Julian's heir. "How are you feeling?" she asked, taking my hand as another contraction peaked. "Like I'm being torn apart," I managed between gritted teeth. "Julian is beside himself," Elena said with what might have been amusement. "He's demanding the pilot fly faster than the laws of physics allow. I think this is the first time in his adult life that money and power can't solve his immediate problem." Despite everything, I almost smiled at the image of Julian Cross, master of the universe, rendered helpless by airline schedules and international flight patterns. The labor progressed with startling speed. By noon, Dr. Huang was telling me to push, her voice cutting through the haze of pain and exhaustion that had consumed the morning. Elena held one hand while Margaret held the other, both women providing strength and encouragement as I brought Julian's son into the world. The moment I heard his first cry, everything else disappeared. All the complications, the moral compromises, the impossible circumstances of his conception, none of it mattered compared to the perfect, furious little human being placed on my chest. He was beautiful, with dark hair like his father's, and tiny fists that gripped my finger with surprising strength. "He's perfect," Dr. Huang announced. 6 pounds, 4 ounces, small but healthy. I was crying, overwhelmed by a love so fierce it felt like drowning. This was my son, my child, the best thing I'd ever done in my life. Whatever happened next, whatever Julian demanded or Elena orchestrated, nothing could change the fundamental truth that this baby was mine. Julian arrived 2 hours later, still wearing his London business suit, and looking like he'd aged years during the flight. He burst into the medical suite with barely controlled panic, scanning the monitors and medical equipment as if checking for threats. "Is he all right?" Julian demanded, approaching my bed with careful steps. "Are you all right?" "We're both fine," I said softly, adjusting the blanket so he could see his son's face. "He's perfect." Julian stopped breathing for a moment, staring down at the tiny person who carried his genes and his future. When he finally reached out to touch the baby's cheek with one finger, his hand was trembling. "He looks like you," Julian whispered, his voice thick with emotion I'd never heard from him before. "He has your chin," I replied, "and your stubborn expression." For several minutes, we existed in a bubble of shared wonder, 2 people who'd created life together, despite all the complications between us. Julian sat carefully on the edge of the bed, and I placed our son in his arms for the first time. "Hello, little one," Julian murmured, his entire demeanor transformed by the weight of new fatherhood. "I'm your daddy. I've been waiting so long to meet you." Elena watched from the doorway, her expression unreadable. I caught her eye and saw something there. Not jealousy exactly, but a recognition that this moment changed everything. This wasn't about business arrangements or practical partnerships anymore. This was about family, blood, the primal bonds that transcended rational planning. "Have you chosen a name?" Elena asked quietly. Julian looked at me, waiting for my answer. We'd discussed several possibilities over the past months, but I'd been waiting to see his face before making the final decision. "Jake," I said firmly. "Jake Julian Cross." Julian's eyes widened in surprise. "After your former partner?" "After the man who died protecting what was right," I corrected. "I want our son to have that kind of courage." For a moment, I thought Julian might object. The name carried too much history, too many uncomfortable reminders of the events that had brought us together. But then, he looked down at the baby in his arms and nodded slowly. "Jake Julian Cross," he repeated, testing the sound. "It's a strong name. A good name." The next few hours passed in a blur of feeding schedules, diaper changes, and visitors bearing expensive gifts. Julian's business associates arrived with flowers and congratulations, each trying to curry favor with the new father. Elena coordinated everything with her usual efficiency, ensuring I had privacy when needed while managing the social obligations Julian's position demanded. But it was during a quiet moment late that evening, when the visitors had gone and Elena had retired to her own suite, that Julian and I finally had the conversation I'd been dreading. "This changes things," he said quietly, watching our son sleep in the bassinet beside my bed. "What do you mean?" I asked, though I already knew. "I mean that I will never let anything happen to him. Or to you." Julian's voice carried a finality that made my blood run cold. "Whatever it takes, whatever I have to do, I will protect my family." "Julian." "No, Jessica. Listen to me." He turned to face me fully, his ice blue eyes burning with intensity. "I know you've been thinking about leaving, about taking Jake and trying to build some kind of normal life somewhere else. I know you believe that's what's best for him." My heart hammered against my ribs. He was right. I had been thinking exactly that. "But it's not going to happen," Julian continued relentlessly. "Not now, not ever. Jake is my heir, the future of everything I've built. He belongs here, with me, learning what it means to carry the Cross name." "And what about what I want?" I asked desperately. What you want is for your son to be safe and loved and have every possible advantage in life, Julian said with absolute certainty. I can provide all of that. No one else can. You can't keep us prisoner forever. I'm not keeping you prisoner, Jessica. I'm keeping you protected. There's a difference. Julian stood and moved to the window, gazing out at the city lights that sparkled like fallen stars. Do you know what I did while you were in labor today? I shook my head, afraid to hear the answer. I bought the remaining pieces of Carlos Mendoza's empire. The legitimate businesses, the shell companies, even the properties his family thought were safely hidden in other countries. All of it now belongs to Cross Industries. He turned back to me with a predatory smile. Your son will inherit the combined wealth of both organizations, transformed into something respectable and legal. You're talking about blood money. I'm talking about resources that will ensure Jake Cross never wants for anything. The best schools, the finest opportunities, protection from any threat that might arise. Julian's expression softened slightly. I'm talking about giving our son everything I never had. And what about love? What about a mother who chose to be here instead of being forced? You do choose to be here, Julian said, with infuriating confidence. Every day, you choose Jake's safety over your own desires for freedom. You choose his future over your past. That's what makes you a good mother. The manipulation was so subtle, so perfectly crafted, that I almost believed it myself. He was offering me a gilded cage and calling it choice, trapping me with my own maternal instincts. What if I refuse? I asked weakly. Julian's smile was sad, but implacable. Then you'll discover that I'm much more creative than Carlos Mendoza ever was, and much more patient. The threat hung in the air between us, wrapped in velvet but unmistakably steel. I looked at my sleeping son, this perfect, innocent child who would grow up surrounded by wealth and power and secrets. This baby who would never know what it meant to struggle or want or fear for his safety. I need time to think, I said finally. Of course, Julian agreed graciously. Take all the time you need. You'll find that motherhood has a way of clarifying priorities. He bent to kiss Jake's forehead, then mine, his lips warm and familiar against my skin. Welcome to the family, Jessica. Both of you. After he left, I sat in the darkness holding my son, feeling the weight of every decision that had led to this moment. Jake Morrison would have told me to fight, to find a way to escape this beautiful prison. But Jake Morrison was dead, and his killer was dead, and the only family my son would ever know was the one Julian Cross provided. When Elena knocked softly on my door an hour later, I wasn't surprised to see her. How are you feeling? She asked, settling into the chair Julian had vacated. Trapped, I said honestly. Or protected, Elena suggested gently. Perspective changes everything, Jessica. Did you ever want children? I asked suddenly. Elena was quiet for a long moment. Once, but my life took different turns. Now I have you and Jake, which is perhaps better than anything I could have planned. This isn't a fairy tale, Elena. This isn't happily ever after. No, she agreed. It's better. It's real, complicated and difficult and sometimes painful, but real. Fairy tales end, Jessica. This is just the beginning. As dawn broke over Lake Michigan, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, I made my choice. Not because I wanted to, but because love sometimes means accepting impossible circumstances for the sake of something more important than your own desires. I chose my son's future over my own freedom. I chose Julian's protection over uncertain independence. I chose the devil I knew over the angels I could only dream of. Outside my window, Chicago awakened to a new day. Millions of people beginning their ordinary lives with ordinary problems. But in this tower high above the city, cradling the air to an empire built on shadows and compromise, I began my extraordinary life as Jessica Cross. The woman I had been was gone forever. The woman I was becoming would have to be strong enough for whatever came next.